Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 15 and discuss some of the devices that Impressionist composers use as a tool. So Impressionism and related styles, which is pretty much largely isolated to Dadaism, which you'll hear in the music of Eric Satie, is a style of music that sort of breaks away. It's sort of the first foray into breaking away from our traditional views on harmony. So composers, it was first applied to a group of French painters, and you've probably seen some of these paintings before. I will post links to the actual paintings, but anything by Manet, Monet, so like the Monet water lilies, Auguste Renoir, Mary Cassatt, Degas, the person who painted all the ballerinas. All of them are Impressionist painters. And their interest in light and color led to a style characterized by blurred images that convey the impression of a scene. So it's all about sort of giving the atmosphere of a scene rather than a perfect picture of, a mother and child or something like that. During the late Romantic, so like the 80s and 90s and into the turn of the century, Debussy's a little bit longer, so 1862 to 1918, he's the earliest. So this term is described from music, and this is mostly for composers like Debussy, Ravel, who came after him, Lily Boulanger, and a few other French composers. So this is an extension of post-Romantic, and again, they wanted to escape basically what Wagner had done. So all of the stuff that Wagner did, Debussy said, I've got to avoid that. So some of the devices that they would use to obscure this tonality, this extreme tonality that Wagner so loved, right? They break away from traditional major and minor modes, and they start using church modes, right? So in here we have Dorian mode. Dorian mode beginning on A. So the half step changes from the 7th step to the 6th. Like that. And you can see it represented here in the Bloch. Ernest Bloch is another composer of the Impressionist era, in these chanty poems of the sea. Again, here's 15.2, another church mode, Phrygian mode. So in this case, you can see the half step happens between the A and the B flat instead of the 7th and 8th step up here. This is Phrygian mode, another common mode used by Impressionists. Instead of moving the half step to the 7th step, it moves between the 1st and 2nd step. So here's Phrygian mode. And you can hear Respighi, who's another Impressionist, use this in his short little piece, Botticelli Triptych. Okay. Another method that they would use is the pentatonic scale. So that means it's a 5-note scale. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the octave. So there are no half steps in this scale at all. It's all whole steps or a step and a half, like this, between the E and the G natural. So this also obscures this tonality, even though it's based, all of these notes are based on a C major scale, and you can find them in a C major scale. There are no half steps to lead you towards any particular tonality. Another really common scale that's used in the Impressionist era is the pentatonic scale. Now there are two possibilities for a pentatonic scale, and it's just depending on which notes you decide to skip. Okay, so there is so we're skipping the F, that half step. Instead, we jump up to G. So it's a whole step, step and a half, whole step, step and a half, and then back down. Now we can do another combination and get rid of the half step right there. So all we do is get rid of the E instead of the F. So we do whole step and then we jump up to the F. That's our step and a half. Whoops. There we go. And here you can see in Debussy's Les Preludes, we've got, or in his Preludes, here you've got another pentatonic scale. So this one, basically it uses all black keys. So it's E flat, G flat, A flat, B flat, D flat. And this piece right here, Voiles, or Sails, is completely based on this pentatonic scale, this little tune right here. That's the pentatonic scale, and if we see in 15.4, Debussy uses this, and he actually just uses all of the black keys as a pentatonic scale. So it's all right, and you can see this in his piece Voiles. Final scale system that Impressionists use to obscure traditional tonality is the whole tone scale. And the whole tone scale is just a scale that instead of using half steps and whole steps, you're going to use all whole steps. So you get rid of all the half steps. So you go from C to D, D to E, E to F sharp, so there's no F natural. And then from there, we've got to go F sharp to G sharp, G sharp to A sharp, and then finally up to C. So an important aspect of this scale is that, again, there are no perfect fifths or fourths, right? So there are no perfect intervals, only between the octave. So it's all going to be, you're going to see tritones, basically. And the whole tone scale is not diatonic. So it contains no key or tonal center. And this is important. This is how the Impressionists get that sound. And it can begin on any of the 6 tones. All right, so you could start it here, and you'll still end up in the same place. You could start on D, you'll play the same notes. Start on E, you'll end up playing the same notes because it's all equal. So a continuation of this is Debussy's Voiles, or Sails. You'll see it's all based on the whole tone. The final scale that composers are going to use to create that sort of impressionist sound is the whole tone scale. So all that means is that you're going to, instead of having half steps and whole steps, so here we've got our normal scale composed of half steps and whole steps. Like that, or a chromatic scale, which is composed of all half steps. Like that, we have a scale that's composed entirely of whole steps. So it's going to sound like this. All right. Or you can start on D flat and do a similar scale. So it's going to look like this. All So there are no perfect fourths or perfect fifths between any degree. That half step is missing, right? So it's a minor sixth or a tritone. Another method that composers love to use are 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th chords. So expanded chords, expanded harmony. It's all over the place, particularly 9ths and 13ths. So you can see in this Ravel sonatine, again, they definitely employ the 9th and the 7th, which further obscures the harmony. And one way they do this is something called chords of addition and omission. And all that chords of addition and omission are chords where there's an added note to it. So in this case, you've got F, A, C, and then this D, which is just sort of, seems like it's tagged on, right? And because of its placement as a minor second, it obscures its original intent. So it could be either an F major or F minor 13th chord, F major 13th chord, right? Or it could be a D minor chord in in an inversion. So but it obscures that specifically. And you can get them in 6th, a 4th, or a 2nd. They'll also omit important notes from chords. So in this case, they'll omit the 3rd, which obscures whether it's major or minor, which again obscures our tonality, right? So this is 15.9. In the case of chords of addition and omission, all we're doing is adding an extra note to it. So that D is going to be extra. Or you can add a 4th. So you keep this triad and then add the 4th. Or you can add a 2nd. So you're going to keep the triad and add that 2nd. It gives it that impressionist wavy sound. Another thing that you can do is omit a 3rd, because of course a 3rd is theoretically one of the most important parts of the chord, right? So it tells us whether it's major or minor, which composers in the Impressionist era are trying to avoid. So they get rid of it and they just have, so without that 3rd, this is what it should be. Composers like Debussy and Ravel prefer that. Or, in the case of our next omitted 3rd, it's a dominant 7th chord, right? Or a major 7th chord. And they'll get rid of the 3rd. So it's like that. Or you could take a dominant 7th chord, do the same thing. Get rid of the 3rd.